Here's a question that might sound simple but is actually very loaded. Why does being single at 30 still feel like a problem in South Korea in 2026? Because from the outside, South Korea looks like a fully modern, progressive, high-tech society. The country has world-class cities, globally recognized entertainment, some of the fastest internet in the world, and women who are highly educated and professionally accomplished. So why, in a country that advanced, does a woman's marital status at 30 still carry so much social weight? The answer is uncomfortable. And it is this: modernization and equality are not the same thing. A country can have the latest technology, the most popular music, and the most stylish fashion while still holding onto deeply unequal social standards. And South Korea, for all its remarkable achievements, is still working through a fundamental contradiction. It has empowered women educationally and economically while simultaneously failing to update the social expectations placed on them. Women have been allowed into universities, boardrooms, and international stages, but the old script about who they are supposed to be has not been rewritten to match. Let's look at some concrete things that happen in Korean society that reveal just how deeply marital status still defines a woman's perceived worth. First, language. Korean has different social registers, ways of speaking that shift based on the relationship between the people talking. Within some traditional Korean family and community settings, an unmarried woman of a certain age is sometimes referred to using language that carries subtle implications of incompleteness or lack. The words used do not always translate perfectly into other languages, but the social message they carry is clear. You are not yet a finished adult woman until you have a husband. Second, housing and independence. In Korea, it has historically been more common for unmarried adults, especially women, to live with their parents until marriage. This arrangement is changing, particularly in cities like Seoul, where many young people live alone for practical reasons. But the cultural expectation that a woman moves from her parents' home to her marital home, without a long solo chapter in between, is still present in many families. A woman in her 30s who lives independently, manages her own finances, builds her own life, and has no plans to marry is still, in some circles, seen as doing something slightly unusual or even slightly suspicious. Because independence in a woman, in this framework, can read as a sign that she has given up, or worse, that she is too difficult to love. Third, professional advancement. There is documented evidence from workplace studies in South Korea that married women with children often face discrimination in the workplace. They are sometimes seen as less committed, less available, and therefore passed over for promotions. But here's the twist. Single women in their 30s are also sometimes viewed with skepticism, not for having too many family commitments, but for being perceived as emotionally unstable or socially unusual for not having them. Women essentially cannot win. Married with kids. Too distracted. Single at 30. Something must be wrong with her. This double bind, where every option comes with a social penalty, is a hallmark of a system that was never designed with women's full humanity in mind. What does it actually feel like to live inside the system? Women who have spoken openly about their experiences describe something that sounds a lot like being watched. Like every year that passes without a ring is a year that everyone around them notices and silently judges. One woman described it as feeling like you are in a race you never agreed to enter, but everyone else is keeping score. Another said that her 30th birthday, which should have been a celebration, felt more like a deadline she had missed. These are not dramatic exaggerations. These are the real emotional consequences of living inside a culture that has tied a woman's social value to a timeline she did not create. It is also important to acknowledge that this standard hurts men too, just in different and often less visible ways. Korean men face their own version of the marriage pressure, particularly the expectation that they must be financially stable enough to afford housing and support a family before they can be considered marriage material. That pressure has contributed to the widespread anxiety, overwork, and burnout that many young Korean men experience. But, and this is crucial, the social consequences of failing to meet those expectations are not the same. A man who is single at 35 is sometimes seen as still working on himself. A woman who is single at 35 is sometimes seen as having been left behind. Same age, very different judgment. That gap reveals the inequality at the heart of the system. What gives me genuine hope is watching how Korean women, especially younger generations, are starting to name this system out loud and refuse to participate in it on the old terms. The conversation is changing. Women are claiming their right to define their own value, their own timelines, their own version of a good life. That shift is not happening fast enough, and it is not happening equally across all social classes, regions, and family types. But it is happening. And every woman who chooses her own story over the one she was handed is making it a little easier for the next woman to do the same. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for Japanese and Korean language learning content, fun ESL class stories, sometimes even the toxic ones, plus videos about pets, plants, and anything interesting I discover in my daily life.